The alarm cut through the ballroom like a blade before anyone even understood what it meant. Glasses shattered on the floor. Guards in silver armor pushed through the crowd, shouting orders in 6 different languages at once. I was standing near the back wall with a plate of food I never got to finish, and within 3 seconds, the whole room had gone from music and laughter to pure chaos. Someone screamed that a weapon had been detected near the royal platform. I did not plan to move. I did not think about it at all. My body just went, cutting through the panicking crowd toward the raised platform where the most important person in the entire building was standing frozen, surrounded by guards who were suddenly too far away to matter. She was the one everyone in the galaxy talked about. Sovereign Queen Althira Voss, ruler of the Lysera Dominion, a woman whose face had been used for centuries as the measuring stick for beauty across a dozen different species. I had seen her from across the room only minutes earlier and thought she looked like something out of a dream. Now she looked like someone about to die, and none of the guards near her were close enough to stop it. I saw the shape before anyone else did. A small device tucked beneath a serving table, blinking red, aimed directly at the platform. Nobody else was looking at the floor. Everyone was looking at the doors, expecting the danger to walk in wearing a face they recognized. They never thought to look down. I did not have a weapon. I did not have training. I had 2 legs and about 4 seconds, and I used every part of it. I grabbed her by the shoulders and pulled her sideways off the platform half a second before the device detonated with a flash of white light and a sound that felt like it hit me in the chest instead of my ears. We hit the floor together, hard, and the world above us turned into smoke and screaming. For a moment, neither of us moved. Her eyes opened first. They were a deep gold color, unlike anything I had ever seen on another living creature, and they were looking directly at me with an expression I could not read. "You saved my life," she said quietly, her voice somehow calm in the middle of the chaos around us. "I just moved," I said, because it was the only honest thing I could think to say. I didn't plan anything. Guards finally reached us, weapons raised, scanning the smoke for any sign of a second attack. Medical drones swept the room, and somewhere behind us, someone was shouting for the Queen's personal physician. She did not look away from me the entire time. "What is your name?" she asked. "Ryan," I said. "Ryan Cole." She said my name back slowly, like she was testing the shape of it in her mouth. Then she did something that made every guard in the room freeze in place, weapons still raised, eyes wide with confusion. She reached up and touched my face, gently, the way someone touches something they are afraid might disappear. "He is my mate," she said, loud enough for every person still standing in that smoke-filled room to hear. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. The only sound left was the low hiss of the emergency systems trying to clear the air, and somewhere far off, the last echo of the alarm finally dying out. I did not understand what she meant. Not fully, not yet. I only knew that something had shifted in that room, something bigger than the explosion that had just gone off, bigger than the panic still hanging in the air. A crowd of diplomats from 1,000 different worlds had just watched their most important figure choose a stranger in the middle of an attack, and none of them knew what to do with what they had just seen. The guards helped her to her feet first. Then, hesitantly, one of them offered a hand to help me up too, though his eyes kept flicking toward the Queen like he was waiting for her to correct herself, to say she had misspoken, that the shock of the blast had confused her. She did not correct herself. "Clear the room," she told her guards. "Secure the area, and bring him with me." I remember thinking, as 2 armored guards gently guided me toward a side exit, that I had come to this event only because a friend had traded his invitation to me for a favor I still owed him. I remember thinking that an hour ago my biggest concern had been whether the food on my plate was safe for a human stomach to handle. Now I was being walked through a private corridor behind the most famous woman in known space, my ears still ringing, my hands still shaking from the blast. The corridor led to a quiet room with soft lighting and tall windows looking out over the city below. She was already there when I arrived, standing near the glass, her golden skin flickering faintly with a soft rose color I would later learn reflected her emotional state. She turned when I entered and studied me for a long moment before speaking. "You do not understand what just happened," she said. "No," I admitted, "I really don't. My people can sense danger before it happens. It is part of what we are. I felt the device before it triggered, and I could not move fast enough to save myself. You moved when no one else did. You risked your own life for someone you had never met, without a single moment of hesitation." She paused. "In my culture, that instinct, that willingness, is the rarest quality a person can have. Rarer than beauty, rarer than power. Where I come from, that's usually just called doing the right thing," I said. Something shifted in her expression, something close to a smile. "Then perhaps your people understand something mine forgot a long time ago." I did not know what to say to that. I was a cargo logistics officer on a freighter that barely passed inspection every year. I did not belong in a room like this, having a conversation like this, with a person like her. And yet here I was, and she was looking at me like I was the only person in the building. "I need you to understand something," she continued. "What I said back there, in front of everyone, was not something I can simply take back. Among my people, a declaration like that carries weight. It will not be seen as a passing comment. It will be seen as a formal claim." "A claim of what, exactly?" "Of you," she said simply, "as my chosen partner, my mate, for the remainder of my reign." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because my brain genuinely did not have another response prepared. "You don't know anything about me." "I know enough," she said. "I know you moved without hesitation to save a stranger. I know you did not ask what species I was, or what rank, or what benefit it might bring you. You simply acted. That tells me more about a person than 100 years of formal courtship ever could." Outside, I could hear the sound of ships moving through the sky, security vessels sweeping the area for any further threat. Somewhere in this same building, 1,000 diplomats were probably already arguing about what had just happened, about what it meant, about whether it could even be allowed to stand. "There are going to be people who are very unhappy about this," I said. "Yes," she said, without a trace of concern. "There will be. That doesn't worry you? I have spent my entire life being told what is expected of me, what I am supposed to want, who I am supposed to choose based on charts and measurements and old agreements between old families." Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it, something tired. "Tonight, for the first time, I chose something because it was true, not because it was expected. I will not apologize for that." I looked at her for a long moment. This woman who ruled over an entire star system, who had just survived an attempt on her life, who was now standing in a quiet room telling a stranger that he had somehow become the center of her entire world in the span of 4 seconds. "This is insane," I said quietly. "Yes," she agreed, "it is." Neither of us moved to leave. Outside the tall windows, the city lights stretched out for miles, indifferent to the fact that somewhere inside that glowing skyline, everything about my life had just changed forever, and I had no idea yet how far the consequences of that single moment were about to travel. A soft chime interrupted the silence between us. One of her guards stepped into the room, his expression tight with tension. "Your Radiance," he said carefully. "The Concordance Council has already called an emergency session. They are requesting your presence within the hour." She did not look surprised. She only nodded once, slow and certain, like someone who had expected the storm before it arrived. "Let them call their session," she said. "I will answer every question they have." Then she turned to me, and for the first time since the explosion, I saw something close to worry cross her face. "Are you prepared for what comes next?" she asked. I thought about lying. I thought about saying yes, of course, everything is fine. Instead, I told her the truth, because it seemed like the only thing that made any sense in a night that had stopped making sense the moment the alarm went off. "No," I said, but I don't think I have a choice anymore. She reached out and took my hand, her fingers warm against mine, and for just a moment, the fear on her face softened into something steadier. Then we will face it together, she said. Behind us, through the tall windows, more security ships rose into the night sky, circling the building like slow-moving stars, and somewhere far below, the first reports of what had happened were already spreading across 1,000 worlds, carrying my name to places I had never even heard of, and changing, in ways I could not yet understand, what it meant to be human in the eyes of the entire galaxy. The council chamber was already loud before we even reached the doors. I could hear voices shouting over each other through the thick walls, dozens of species arguing in languages I did not recognize, and underneath all of it, a translator device somewhere kept trying to keep pace and failing. 2 guards walked in front of us and 2 behind, and Aelthira kept her hand around mine the entire way, steady, refusing to let go, even as the noise grew louder with every step. "Whatever they say in there," she told me quietly, "do not let it shake you." "I'll try," I said, though my heart was pounding hard enough that I was fairly sure everyone around me could hear it too. The doors opened, and the shouting stopped all at once. 100 delegates from every corner of known space turned to look at us, seated in tall curved rows that wrapped around a central platform like the inside of a shell. Some of them were tall and covered in dark scales. Some floated in tanks of pale liquid. Some looked almost human, except for small details that made my skin crawl if I looked too long. Every single one of them was staring directly at me. A delegate near the front stood first, tall and thin, with skin the color of dried clay and narrow eyes that studied me like I was a stain on his boots. I would learn later that his name was Corin Vale, senior representative of the Vithrixian Compact, and that his family had spent 3 generations trying to arrange a match with the Lysara throne. "This is unacceptable," he said, his voice carrying easily through the chamber without any need for amplification. "A human, an unranked species with no seat on this council, no genetic registry, no place in any compatibility index ever created, and you would have us believe the Sovereign Queen intends to bond with him." "I do not need you to believe anything," Aelthira said calmly. "I only need you to accept it." "Accept it?" Corin's voice rose sharply. "Do you understand what this does to the balance of the compact? 3 species have spent decades preparing potential candidates for this exact bonding. Alliances were built around the expectation of this match. And you would throw all of that away because a stranger happened to be standing near you during an attack." "He did not simply happen to be standing near me," she said, her voice hardening for the first time since I had met her. "He moved toward danger while your finest trained guards were still reaching for their weapons. He acted while an entire room full of powerful, important people stood frozen. Explain to me, Ambassador, how that fact changes, because his species has no seat at this table." Corin's jaw tightened, but he did not have an answer ready. Another delegate rose, this one shorter, with deep blue skin and calm, careful eyes. She introduced herself as Chief Inquisitor Sela Doran, and her tone was far more measured than Corin's had been. "Your Radiance," she said. "No one here doubts what he did tonight was brave. But bravery alone has never been the standard by which a sovereign chooses a mate. There are protocols, genetic verification, behavioral assessment across a full cycle of observation. None of that has happened here." "Then let it happen," Aelthira said simply. "Test him, study him, observe him for as long as your protocols require. I am not afraid of what you will find." The chamber fell into murmurs, delegates leaning toward each other, whispering in a dozen different tongues. I stood there, silent, feeling like a specimen already, long before any formal testing had even begun. Sela studied me for a long moment. "Very well," she said finally. "The council will conduct a formal inquiry, full behavioral review, full security review, given the attack tonight occurred in his presence." That last part landed heavier than I expected. "Wait," I said, before I could stop myself. Every eye in the chamber turned toward me. Are you saying I'm a suspect? We are saying, Sela replied evenly, that an assassination attempt occurred at the exact moment a human with no prior royal contact happened to be close enough to the sovereign queen to save her life. Some on this council will wonder whether that closeness was convenient or arranged. The room went cold around me. I felt Aelthira's grip on my hand tighten. He risked his own life to push me out of the blast radius, she said sharply. If he had wanted me dead, he had every opportunity to simply let the device do its work. Unless, Corin said quietly, almost pleasantly, the goal was never your death, but exactly this: public sympathy, a dramatic rescue, a declaration made in the heat of shock and fear, one that a calmer mind might never have spoken. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. It had not occurred to me until that exact moment that someone might have engineered the entire situation, not to kill the queen, but to manufacture the very bond that now stood between us. I didn't plan any of this, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I didn't even know this event was a courtship ceremony until an hour ago. I came because a friend gave me his invitation. Ask anyone on my ship. Ask anyone who has known me longer than tonight. We intend to, Sela said. Every record of your life will be reviewed. Every associate. Every transaction. If there is nothing to find, you have nothing to fear. And if someone plants something to find? I asked. The chamber went quiet again. Sela's expression did not change, but something in her eyes suggested she had already considered that possibility too. Then this council will deal with that when it becomes evident, she said. Until then, the inquiry proceeds. You will remain under Concordance protection during the process, given the very real threat against the Sovereign Queen's life tonight. Aelthira stepped forward, before anyone could add anything further. Then let it proceed quickly, she said, because whatever your inquiry finds, my choice does not change. The session ended without agreement, without resolution, the whole chamber still buzzing with tension, as delegates filed out in tight clusters, whispering among themselves. I felt eyes on me the entire walk back through the corridor, and for the first time since the explosion, the fear that gripped me was not about the blast itself, but about what might come after it. We were given quarters in the royal wing for the night, 2 rooms connected by a private hallway, guarded by 4 of Aelthira's most trusted soldiers. I did not sleep. I sat by the window instead, watching the city lights flicker below, running the entire night over and over in my mind, trying to find the moment where everything had gone from ordinary to impossible. Around what I guessed was the middle of the night, a soft knock came at my door. It was Aelthira, wrapped in a simple robe, her golden skin dimmed to a quiet, tired color I had not seen before. "You should be resting," she said. "So should you," I answered. She stepped inside anyway, and we sat together near the window in silence for a while before she finally spoke again. "I need to tell you something," she said, "before this goes any further." "Okay." "The device that exploded tonight was not powerful enough to kill me," she said. "My guards confirmed it after the blast. It was designed to cause panic, chaos, a distraction, nothing more." I turned to look at her fully. "Then what was the actual target?" "I do not know yet," she admitted, "but I have my suspicions. There are those within my own court, and within the wider Concordance, who benefit greatly from instability right now. A distraction at exactly the right moment, during exactly the event where I was expected to choose a mate, is not something I believe was random. You think someone wanted chaos in that room specifically so you'd make a rushed decision?" "Perhaps," she said. "Or perhaps they wanted something else entirely, and my choice of you was simply an unexpected consequence they did not plan for." She looked at me carefully. "Either way, you are now a target, Ryan. Whoever set that device tonight will not be pleased that their plan resulted in a declaration they cannot easily undo." A chill ran down my spine. "So the danger isn't over?" "No," she said quietly. "I believe it is only beginning." Outside the window, One of the security ships passed low over the building, its lights sweeping briefly across the room before moving on. Althea watched it go, her expression unreadable, before turning back to me. "I will not let anything happen to you," she said, "but I need you to understand what you have stepped into. This is no longer simply about a courtship the council disapproves of. Someone in this compact wanted chaos tonight, and chaos rarely stops after a single attempt." I thought about the crowded ballroom, the flash of white light, the device blinking beneath the table that no one else had thought to check. I thought about Corin Vale's calm, careful voice, suggesting that I might have arranged the entire thing myself. "Then we find out who did it," I said, "before they try again." She studied me for a long moment, something like relief and worry mixing together in her expression. "Together," she said again, the same word she had used earlier that night. "Together," I agreed. Neither of us knew yet just how far the danger would reach, or how many more attempts would follow before the truth behind that first explosion finally came to light. But sitting there in the quiet dark, with the whole weight of 1,000 worlds now watching us, I understood one thing clearly for the first time since the alarm had first gone off. Whatever came next, there was no going back to the life I had before that night. The formal inquiry began the next morning, and it did not feel like a review. It felt like an interrogation dressed up in polite language. They placed me in a small, bright room with smooth white walls and no visible corners, the kind of space clearly designed to make a person feel like there was nowhere to hide, physically or otherwise. Sela Doran conducted the questioning herself, calm and precise, while a panel of scanning devices hovered quietly around me, reading whatever it is those machines read. "State your full name and place of origin," she said. "Ryan Cole, born on a colony station orbiting a planet called Verdane. Cargo logistics officer aboard a transport ship called the Wandering Light. How long have you served aboard that vessel?" 6 years. "And in that time, have you had any contact, direct or indirect, with representatives of the Lysara Dominion?" "None. I didn't even know what the Lysara looked like until last night." She continued like that for over an hour, question after question, methodical and unhurried, while I answered as honestly as I could, aware the entire time that somewhere behind those smooth white walls, people were deciding whether my life as I knew it was about to end. When it was finally over, Sela studied me for a long moment before speaking again, her voice softer than before. "For what it is worth," she said, "nothing in your record suggests any prior connection to the Dominion, or to anyone who might have wanted the Sovereign Queen harmed. I do not believe you orchestrated last night's events." Relief hit me harder than I expected. "Thank you." "Do not thank me yet," she said. "Not everyone on the council will accept these findings so easily, and the attempt on the Sovereign Queen's life remains unsolved. Until it is, both of you remain in danger." She was right to warn me. 3 days later, the danger returned. I was staying in the guest wing of the Royal Palace by then, a place with tall ceilings and long windows that looked out over gardens filled with plants I did not recognize. Plants that shimmered faintly at night, like they were lit from somewhere deep inside their stems. Althea visited often, sometimes for an hour, sometimes only for a few minutes between council duties, and each time she came, I found it a little harder to remember the version of my life before I had known her. It was late in the evening when the power in my wing flickered once, then died completely. I sat up immediately, my instincts sharpened by 3 days of constant tension. The guards outside my door were silent, which was wrong, because they were never silent. I moved to the door and found it locked from the outside, though it had never been locked before. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway, too many to be my usual guards, moving with a careful, practiced quiet that told me immediately these were not people meant to be there. I backed away from the door just as it exploded inward, not with fire this time, but with a burst of pale blue light that knocked it clean off its hinges. 3 figures moved through the smoke, dressed in dark armor with no visible markings, faces hidden behind smooth reflective visors. I did not wait to ask questions. I grabbed a heavy metal lamp from the table beside me and swung it hard at the first figure through the door, catching him across the shoulder just as he raised his weapon. He staggered back into the second figure, buying me half a second, and I used it to dive through the shattered doorway into the corridor beyond. The guards who should have been posted outside were lying motionless on the floor, and for one terrible moment I thought they were dead, though I would later learn they had only been stunned. I did not stop to check. I ran, my bare feet slapping against the cold floor, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. Behind me, the 3 armored figures gave chase, moving fast and silent, closing the distance with terrifying ease. The palace at night was a maze of quiet halls and locked doors, and every turn I took felt like a gamble. I ducked into a side corridor, praying it led somewhere useful, and found myself in a long gallery lined with tall windows overlooking the gardens below. A dead end, except for the windows themselves, tall panels of thick glass that led out onto a narrow balcony 2 floors above the ground. Footsteps echoed behind me, close now, far too close. I did not think. I ran straight at the nearest window and threw my shoulder into it, and to my enormous relief, the glass was not as thick as it looked. It shattered outward, and I stumbled onto the balcony, cold night air hitting my face, the garden shimmering faintly below in the dark. One of the armored figures reached the broken window just as I swung myself over the balcony railing, dropping onto a lower rooftop that I had not even confirmed would hold my weight. It did, though the impact sent pain shooting up through both my ankles. I did not have time to feel it properly. I rolled, scrambled to my feet, and kept moving, sliding down a sloped section of rooftop toward the gardens below, my pursuers now firing something at me. Small bright bolts of energy that scorched the stone wherever they struck. I hit the garden hard, rolling through soft shimmering plants that cushioned the fall just enough to keep me from breaking anything. I did not stay down. I pushed up and ran again, weaving between tall glowing stalks, my lungs burning, my mind screaming at me to keep moving. Just keep moving. A hand grabbed my arm from the shadows, and I nearly struck out before I recognized the voice. "It's me," Elthira said sharply, pulling me behind a thick cluster of plants just as the armored figures burst into the garden above us. "Quiet. Follow me." She led me through a hidden path in the garden I never would have found on my own, moving with a speed and certainty that told me this was not the first time she had needed an escape route from her own home. We reached a small maintenance door hidden behind a wall of vines, and she pressed her palm against a hidden panel that slid the door open silently. Inside was a narrow service tunnel, dimly lit, running beneath the palace itself. "Move," she whispered, and I did not argue. We ran through the tunnel for what felt like 10 minutes, the sound of pursuit fading slowly behind us, until we reached a small chamber with a single guard already waiting. Someone Elthira clearly trusted completely. "Seal the tunnel behind us," she ordered, and the guard nodded, already moving to comply. Only once the heavy door was sealed did she finally turn to me, breathing hard, her golden skin flickering rapidly between colors I did not recognize, colors I would later learn represented fear. "Are you hurt?" she asked. "Bruised," I said. "Nothing broken, I think." She reached out and gripped my shoulders, checking me over with quick, careful hands, and for a moment neither of us said anything at all. "They came for you specifically," she said finally. "Not for me. My guards outside your room were stunned, not killed, which means whoever sent them wanted you removed, not eliminated entirely. That suggests they intend to use you somehow, rather than simply erase the problem." "Use me how?" "I do not know," she admitted. "But I intend to find out." Her expression hardened into something I had not seen from her before, something sharp and dangerous beneath the calm exterior she usually wore. This attack proves the assassination attempt at the gala was never truly aimed at me. It was aimed at creating exactly this situation. A bonded human that certain factions could then use as leverage, or remove entirely once they no longer needed the chaos it caused. Corin Vale, I said quietly. Perhaps, she said, or someone using his ambitions as cover for something larger. I cannot accuse him without proof, not yet, but I intend to get that proof, one way or another. We spent the rest of that night in a hidden section of the palace, known only to her most trusted guards, a place with no windows and no official record of its existence. I did not sleep again. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the flash of energy bolts scorching the stone beside me, felt the cold night air on my skin as I dropped from that balcony, not knowing if the ground below would break my legs or save my life. By morning, Sela Doran arrived personally, her calm expression replaced by something far more serious. "The armor worn by your attackers has been traced," she said without preamble. "It matches equipment reported stolen from a private security contractor 3 months ago, a contractor with known ties to several council members, including, though I cannot yet prove direct involvement, Ambassador Corin Vale." "Then arrest him," I said. "On stolen equipment alone, I cannot," Sela replied. "The council operates under strict evidentiary standards, standards that exist precisely to prevent powerful families from being falsely accused by their rivals. I need more before I can act." "And until then?" Aelthyra asked, her voice tight. "Until then, both of you remain under maximum protection," Sela said. "And I would strongly suggest neither of you appear in public without a full security detail, effective immediately." Aelthyra's jaw tightened, but she nodded once, accepting the terms even as I could see how much she hated needing them. Later that day, alone in the hidden chamber, she finally allowed herself a moment of something other than calm control. She sat beside me, quiet for a long time, before speaking again. "I brought this danger into your life," she said softly. "A single choice, made in a moment of shock, and now you are hunted through corridors and gardens in the middle of the night." "You didn't bring the danger," I said. "Whoever set that first device did. You just happened to be standing near me when it went off, same as I happened to be standing near you. Perhaps," she said, "but if I release you from this bond, if I declare it a mistake made under duress, the danger to you disappears. You could return to your ship, your quiet life, no inquiries, no attacks in the night." I looked at her carefully, at the golden skin still flickering faintly with worry, at the eyes that had looked at me with such certainty in that ballroom only days ago. "Is that what you want?" I asked. "No," she said, almost immediately, almost before I had even finished the question. "It is the furthest thing from what I want." "Then that's your answer," I said. "I'm not leaving because someone in a council chamber doesn't approve, and I'm not leaving because someone in stolen armor tried to drag me out of a room in the middle of the night. If we're going to end this, we end it by finding whoever is responsible, not by running from them." Something in her expression shifted, the worry giving way, slowly, to something steadier, something that looked almost like the certainty she had shown me on the night we first met. "Then we find them," she said. "Together." Outside the hidden chamber, far above us, the palace continued its normal rhythms, guards patrolling, diplomats arguing, the business of 1,000 worlds carrying on as though nothing unusual had happened at all. But somewhere within those same walls, someone had ordered an attack meant to remove me from a bond they could not politically dismantle, and I understood now, with a clarity that settled cold and certain in my chest, that whoever they were, they would not stop until either they succeeded or we found them first. Sela Doran returned 2 days later with a lead, and this time she did not come alone. Beside her walked a young woman named Grace Linden, a human investigator working under contract with the Concordance Security Division, someone Sela had personally requested once she learned my own species might have information the Council's usual methods could not easily reach. "Ryan Cole," Grace said, extending a hand with the kind of easy confidence that told me she had done this exact introduction 100 times before. "I've read your file. 6 years on a cargo freighter to becoming the reason half the galaxy is arguing in council chambers. That's quite a jump. Believe me, I noticed, I said, shaking her hand. I specialize in tracing financial movement across Concordance member states, she explained, pulling up a holographic display between us. Sella asked me to follow the money behind the stolen security equipment used in the attack on your quarters. It took some digging, but I found something. The display showed a tangled web of transactions, moving between accounts, shell companies, and private holdings scattered across a dozen different systems, all of it eventually converging on a single point. This account, Grace said, highlighting one node in the web, funded the purchase of the stolen armor 3 months ago, before the attack even happened, before you had ever stepped foot in this palace. Before the gala, Aelthera said slowly, understanding dawning in her voice. Exactly, Grace said. Whoever set this in motion didn't react to the bonding. They planned for it, which means they knew, somehow, that something like this was going to happen, or they intended to create it themselves. Whose account is it? I asked. Grace hesitated, glancing briefly at Sella before answering. Officially, it belongs to a private trading company registered on a neutral station outside Concordance jurisdiction. But 3 of the shell companies feeding into that account share directors with a foundation controlled by the Vale family. The room went quiet. Corin Vale, Aelthera said, her voice flat and cold. I can't prove he personally authorized it, Grace said carefully. The Vale Family Foundation employs hundreds of people, and family members are rarely directly linked to operations 3 or 4 layers removed like this. But it is enough to justify a formal investigation, which Sella can now open without violating council procedure. Then open it, Aelthera said. I already have, Sella replied, which is precisely why I wanted to speak with both of you before the council session tomorrow. Corin Vale will likely learn of this investigation before it becomes public. If he is responsible, he may attempt something drastic before we can formally act against him. How drastic? I asked. Sella's expression tightened. The Vale family maintains a private fleet, technically registered for trade protection purposes, but larger than most independent system defenses. If cornered and desperate, it is not impossible he would use it. The weight of that statement settled over the room like a physical thing. We need to move carefully, Aelthera said. An accusation without absolute proof, made publicly, could ignite a conflict far larger than anything that happened in that ballroom. Vale has allies. Families who owe his foundation favors, families who would rally behind him if they believed the Dominion was persecuting him unjustly. So what do we do? I asked. Wait for him to attack again, and hope we're ready? No, Grace said. We find the direct proof before he learns we're close. If we can trace even one transaction that ties Corin Vale personally, not just his foundation, to the stolen armor, the council will have no choice but to act, and his allies will have no ground to defend him on. And if we can't find that proof in time? I asked. Nobody answered that question, because nobody had a good answer to give. We spent the next 2 days moving through data records buried in secure archives, Grace guiding us through financial trails that twisted and doubled back on themselves in ways clearly designed to exhaust anyone trying to follow them. I was not a financial investigator, but I had spent 6 years managing cargo manifests and shipping records, and it turned out that skill translated surprisingly well to spotting inconsistencies in trade documentation. It was late on the second night when I found it. A shipment manifest, buried 3 layers deep in an unrelated trade route, showed a transfer of goods between 2 shell companies that Grace had already flagged as connected to the Vale Foundation. The manifest itself looked ordinary, routine cargo moving between stations, except for one detail that caught my eye purely because of how many shipping manifests I had read over the years. The cargo weight did not match the listed contents. Grace, I said, pulling her attention to the screen. Look at this. Standard components, according to the manifest, should weigh about half what's actually listed here. Grace leaned in, studying the numbers carefully, her expression sharpening with focus. That's a significant discrepancy. Enough to hide something else inside the shipment. Like weapons, I said, or armor components. She pulled up the shipment's destination and origin points, cross-referencing them against the timeline of the attack on my quarters, and her breath caught sharply. This shipment arrived at a private station 3 weeks before the attack, she said. A station registered under a name I did not recognize until just now. Because it uses an old family designation, the Veil line stopped using publicly almost a decade ago. But it is still legally tied to their bloodline records. That's it, Sella said, arriving just in time to see the discovery on the screen, having been called the moment Grace flagged the find. That designation cannot be explained away as a distant shell company or an unrelated contractor. It ties directly to the Veil family line itself, not simply their foundation. Relief and dread hit me at the same time. Relief because we finally had something concrete. Dread because I understood exactly what that meant for what came next. "He'll know soon," Aelthira said quietly. "The moment this evidence moves toward a formal council presentation, his own people will warn him. We do not have the luxury of moving slowly anymore." Sella nodded grimly. "I will convene an emergency session for tomorrow morning. The evidence will be presented formally, in front of the full council, leaving no room for private negotiation or quiet dismissal." "And if he decides not to wait for that session to conclude?" I asked, thinking of the private fleet Sella had mentioned only 2 days earlier. "Then we will be ready," Aelthira said, her voice steady despite the tension clearly running beneath it. "I will have every available guard stationed throughout the palace and the council chamber itself before the sun rises." That night felt longer than any night before it. I lay awake in the hidden chamber, staring at the ceiling, running through every possible way tomorrow could go wrong. Aelthira sat beside me for most of it, quiet, her hand resting over mine, and somewhere around what I guessed was the middle of the night, she finally spoke. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she said softly, "I need you to know that meeting you was never a mistake, even with everything this choice has brought upon us both." "I know," I said. "I feel the same way." "If Veil moves against the council session directly," she continued, "there is a chance it will not simply be a political battle anymore. It could become something far more dangerous." "I figured that much," I said, "but running from it won't make it safer. Not for you, not for me, not for anyone else caught in the middle of whatever he's planning." She studied me for a long moment in the dim light, and something in her expression settled into quiet resolve. "Then tomorrow," she said, "we face him directly, whatever comes." Morning arrived faster than I wanted it to. The palace was already tense before the sun had fully risen, guards moving in careful, deliberate patterns throughout every corridor, security ships circling overhead in numbers I had not seen since the night of the attack on the ballroom. Grace met us just outside the council chamber, her expression grim but determined. "The evidence is loaded and ready for presentation," she said. "Sella will introduce it the moment the session opens. Once it's public record, there's no way for Veil's allies to quietly bury the investigation." "And if he tries something before that happens?" I asked. Grace's jaw tightened. "Then we'll deal with it as it comes. But Ryan, listen to me. Whatever happens in there, do not act alone. Not this time. We move as a group, or we don't move at all." I nodded, though every instinct in my body still remembered the sound of that door exploding inward 3 nights earlier, the feeling of being hunted through dark corridors with nowhere safe to run. Aelthira took my hand one last time before the chamber doors opened, her golden skin glowing steady and calm despite everything hanging over the moment. "Whatever he brings today," she said quietly, "we face it exactly as we have faced everything else since that night at the gala." "Together," I said. "Together," she agreed, and the chamber doors slid open before us, revealing a room already packed tighter than I had ever seen it. Every delegate from every corner of the Concordance present and waiting. the tension in the air thick enough to feel against my skin the moment we stepped inside. Corin Vale was already seated in his usual place, near the front of the chamber, calm and composed, as though he had no idea what was about to be presented against him. Either he genuinely did not know, or he was better at hiding his fear than anyone I had ever met. Sella Doran stood at the center platform, waiting for the room to settle before she spoke. "This council is called into emergency session," she announced, "to present formal evidence regarding the assassination attempt at the Concordance Gala and the subsequent attack against Ryan Cole 3 nights ago." Murmurs spread through the chamber, delegates leaning toward each other, whispering in hushed, urgent tones. "Evidence gathered through financial and shipment records," Sella continued, "traces the stolen security equipment used in the second attack directly to a private station registered under a designation belonging to the Vale family bloodline." Every eye in the chamber turned toward Corin Vale. He did not flinch, not immediately. He rose slowly, smoothing the front of his formal robes, his expression carefully arranged into something close to offense rather than fear. "This is absurd," he said. "My family's foundation employs thousands across dozens of systems. A shipment passing through a station, technically linked to an old family designation, proves nothing beyond the incompetence of my accounting staff." "Perhaps," Sella said, "which is why we do not rely on that evidence alone." She gestured, and the holographic display above the platform shifted, showing a new set of records, communications this time, intercepted messages between accounts linked directly to Vale's personal correspondence, rather than his family's broader foundation. "These messages," Sella said, "reference a, quote, distraction sufficient to disrupt the Sovereign Queen's choice at the gala, unquote, dated 4 days before the event took place." The chamber erupted into noise. Corin's composed expression finally cracked, something sharp and cornered flashing across his face before he forced it back into calm. "Fabricated," he said, his voice rising to be heard over the noise. "Anyone with sufficient access could plant messages designed to look like private correspondence." "Then perhaps you would care to explain," Sella said calmly, "why those same messages were sent from a private terminal registered to your personal residence on a date when your own security logs confirm you were the only person present in that residence." Corin had no immediate answer. For the first time since I had met him, he looked genuinely uncertain. That uncertainty did not last long. A side door near the front of the chamber burst open, and 4 armed figures moved in fast, wearing the same dark armor I recognized instantly from the attack on my quarters 3 nights earlier. The chamber, already tense, exploded into panic, delegates scrambling away from the platform as guards throughout the room moved to intercept the intruders. "Seal the chamber," Sella shouted, but it was already too late. The armored figures were not there to escape. They were there to finish what the earlier attack had failed to accomplish. One of them raised a weapon directly at me. I moved without thinking, the same instinct that had carried me across that ballroom floor days earlier taking over completely. I grabbed the nearest thing within reach, a heavy ceremonial staff mounted on the wall beside me, and swung it hard just as the bolt fired, deflecting it just enough that it scorched the wall instead of my chest. Chaos exploded around me. Aelthyra's personal guards moved with practiced precision, engaging the intruders directly, while delegates scrambled for cover behind overturned chairs and support columns. Grace pulled me down behind a solid stone barrier near the platform edge, her own weapon drawn, covering the space in front of us with steady, careful aim. "Stay low," she said. "Let the guards handle the fight." But across the chamber, I saw Aelthyra had not taken cover at all. She stood near the center of the platform, calm amid the chaos, her golden skin flaring bright with something that was not fear, but pure, focused anger, and one of the armored figures was moving straight toward her. I did not think. I moved. I came up from behind the barrier and closed the distance faster than I thought my legs could carry me, tackling the armored figure just as he raised his weapon toward her, driving us both hard into the floor. The impact knocked the weapon from his grip, sending it skidding across the polished stone, and we grappled together, his armored strength far greater than mine, but my desperation matching it every bit of the way. He got a hand free and struck me hard across the face, and for a moment my vision blurred white with pain. I felt his other hand reaching for a blade at his side, and I knew if I did not do something in the next second, that blade was going to end this fight permanently. I grabbed the nearest object I could reach, a fallen piece of the ceremonial staff, and drove it hard into the gap at his shoulder where the armor plates joined together. He roared in pain, his grip loosening just enough for me to shove him off and scramble back, chest heaving, ears ringing from the blow to my face. 2 of Aelthira's guards reached us then, subduing him before he could recover, and I collapsed backward against the platform edge, breathing hard, tasting blood in my mouth. Across the chamber, the other intruders were being overwhelmed one by one, Concordance guards flooding in through the main doors now that the initial shock had passed. Within another minute, all 4 armored figures were restrained, weapons cleared, the chaos finally beginning to settle into a tense, watchful quiet. Aelthira reached me before anyone else did, kneeling beside me, her hands checking my face with the same careful urgency she had shown after the first explosion in the ballroom. "You are bleeding," she said, her voice tight. "I'll live," I managed, though my jaw throbbed with every word. Across the chamber, Corin Vale stood frozen in place, surrounded now by his own remaining allies, all of whom had backed several careful steps away from him the moment the armored figures revealed themselves. Whatever support he had walked into that chamber with, it was clear none of them wanted to be associated with an attack carried out in the middle of a formal council session. Sella approached him slowly, her expression cold and final. "I believe," she said, "that concludes any doubt remaining in this chamber." Corin's composure finally shattered completely. "You do not understand what is at stake," he said, his voice rising, desperate now, in a way it had not been before. "For 3 generations, my family prepared for this bonding. Every resource, every alliance, built around the expectation that the throne would strengthen our position in this compact. And you would let it all collapse because of one reckless choice, made in a moment of panic, toward a species with no place in this council at all. That reckless choice," Aelthira said, rising to her feet, her voice carrying clearly across the silent chamber, "saved my life the night your own device nearly ended it. And when that failed to erase him from my side, you sent armed men into my own palace, and now into this very chamber, willing to kill dozens of innocent delegates simply to remove one man who dared to matter to me more than your family's ambitions." The chamber remained utterly silent, every delegate watching, waiting. "Take him," Sella ordered, and guards moved forward to restrain Corin Vale, his protests fading into the background as he was led from the chamber, his political career, and likely his family standing within the compact, ending in that exact moment. The aftermath took hours to settle. Statements were taken, the wounded were treated, and slowly, carefully, the council chamber returned to something resembling order. Through it all, Aelthira stayed close beside me, her hand rarely leaving mine, even as physicians tended to the cut along my jaw and the bruises already forming along my ribs. It was well into the evening before the council formally reconvened, this time not to question my presence, but to address what had happened and what would come next. Sella stood at the platform once more, her expression steady despite the long day behind her. "In light of today's events," she said, "and the conclusion of the formal inquiry into Ryan Cole's background and conduct, this council finds no obstruction to the Sovereign Queen's declared bonding. The matter is, as of this session, formally closed." A murmur passed through the chamber, but this time it was different, quieter, more thoughtful than hostile. Delegates who had spent days whispering doubts now looked toward me with something closer to consideration, even respect, several of them nodding slowly as the announcement settled over the room. Aelthira turned to me then, right there in front of the entire council, and for the first time since that first night in the ballroom, I saw something in her expression that was pure, uncomplicated happiness, free of the fear and tension that had shadowed every moment since. "It is done," she said softly. "Truly done." "It's done," I agreed, and despite the bruises, despite the ache in my jaw, I found myself smiling for what felt like the first time in days. The bonding ceremony took place 3 weeks later, once the political dust had fully settled and the Vale family's remaining influence had been formally reduced within the council's structure. It was smaller than tradition usually demanded, a decision Aelthera made deliberately, wanting the day to belong to us rather than to the endless spectacle the compact usually attached to royal occasions. Grace stood among the small gathered crowd, along with Sella and a handful of guards who had become something closer to friends over the past weeks than simple protectors. My own crewmates from the Wandering Light had been brought in as honored guests, their expressions somewhere between disbelief and pride as they watched me stand at the center of a ceremony none of them could have imagined a month earlier. Aelthera took my hands in the quiet garden where the ceremony was held, her golden skin glowing warm and steady in the afternoon light, and when she spoke, her voice carried clearly to everyone gathered, though it felt, somehow, like she was speaking only to me. "On the night we met," she said, "I told you that you were my mate, before I understood anything else about you. I have spent every day since learning exactly why that truth felt so certain, so immediate. You did not hesitate to risk your life for a stranger. You did not waver when an entire council doubted you. You did not run when danger followed you through my own halls. You simply stayed, and faced it, again and again, without ever asking what it would cost you." She paused, her eyes bright with something I had never expected to see directed at me, not in 1,000 lifetimes. "That is not something measured by any index, any bloodline, any tradition my people have built over 10,000 years, she continued. "It is simply who you are, and I choose it, fully, without hesitation, for as long as I am given to choose anything at all. I did not have anything as elegant to offer in return, no 10,000 years of tradition to draw language from, only the plain, ordinary truth of a cargo officer who had somehow found himself standing at the center of something far larger than he ever imagined possible. I didn't come looking for any of this," I said. "I came for free food and a night off my ship, but somewhere between that first explosion and everything that followed, I stopped wanting to go back to the life I had before, not because of what you are, because of who you are, underneath every title, every expectation, every eye in the galaxy watching to see if this would fail." I looked at her, steady and certain in a way I had not felt certain about anything in weeks. "It didn't fail, and I don't plan on letting it." The garden around us fell quiet, and for a long moment there was nothing else in the world except her hands in mine, and the warm golden light spreading slowly across her skin, brighter than I had ever seen it. News of the bonding spread across the compact within hours, and this time the reaction was different from the chaos that had followed that first declaration in the ballroom. Species who had spent weeks debating whether an unranked, untested human could possibly belong beside a sovereign queen now found themselves watching footage of that same human standing firm through an inquiry, a chase through darkened corridors, and an attack in the heart of their own council chamber, refusing at every turn to step aside. Humanity, still one of the newest and smallest voices within the wider compact, found itself suddenly the subject of careful, curious attention from species who had barely acknowledged its existence before. Diplomats who once dismissed human delegations without a second thought began requesting meetings, asking questions, wondering aloud what other qualities this quiet, overlooked species might be hiding beneath its unassuming reputation. I did not become a symbol by choice. I became one simply by refusing to let go of something worth holding on to, even when an entire galaxy seemed determined to convince me it could not possibly be real. Standing in that garden, Aelthira's hand steady in mine, the weight of 1,000 curious worlds settling somewhere far behind us. For the first time since that night at the gala, I understood finally what she had meant, weeks earlier, in that quiet room overlooking the city. Beauty, real beauty, was never about symmetry, or bloodlines, or the careful calculations of 100 aesthetic committees. It was in the choosing, and the staying, and the refusal to run when everything around you insisted that you should. And for the first time since the alarm had first cut through that crowded ballroom, changing everything about my life in the span of a few terrifying seconds, I felt nothing but certainty about exactly where I belonged.